All right, everybody able to see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, well, we're so happy you're here today. And I'm going to go over real quick what we're going to be doing today. Um, it's going to be a great morning and learning more ways to communicate. This is just one of those things we start learning this as a baby and it just continues through life. And as you can see here, we communicate in a lot of different ways. And today we're hoping to build awareness and also insight within yourself and how you communicate in the world. And this, of course, boosts emotional intelligence in the workplace. One of the things we're going to move through is like how incredible it is, the power of listening. And there's so many ways of listening through our body and through our words. We're also going to go over communication challenges. So things that just are common for all of us that we navigate through the world, not only with our families, but also in the workplace and with friends. And this will lead to like how to deal when a rupture happens. And we're going to give you some tools and go over ways to deal with any rupture that may happen through communication. This will also allow us to talk about words and the power of words, and also just the power of listening as well. We're also going to check in about preparing for tough conversations. And so in preparing for that, just like an athlete does, we just watched the Masters last week, some of us, and, those folks, they practice. They practice before they get out there when it's tough and the pressure's on. And so in preparing for difficult conversations, we're going to go over that. And finally, just how this all ties together with strengthening relationships with each other and also with yourself. So happy you're here. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you, Ronnie, unless you have anything to add.
Just wanting to add that we're going to do some skill building today, and we're going to have a follow-up session to this training on April 28th, where we'll dig more into some of the skills that we're going to introduce today. So keep that in mind. And then also, there's so much overlap in what we're going to talk about today and how we manage conflicts when they happen. And so Jen and I also have another training coming up on May 12th about conflict management. So if some of the content that we present today kind of gets your juices flowing and you're really excited to learn more, please join us for those trainings as well. And I know Emily will send out, or maybe has already sent out information about those trainings.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Emily again for navigating all of the technology for us and setting up the Zoom rooms and the polls and everything. So thank you so much, Emily, for your assistance today.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to start out with the many ways that we communicate. And I think that we want to talk about this primarily as a way of just building awareness around the many ways that we communicate, because I think that sometimes when we think about communication, we think about the words that we say. But there are so many different nuances to the way that we communicate. Obviously, the first way is verbally through the words and the sounds that we make. And sometimes this can be, we do communicate accurately what we want to convey in our interactions, but sometimes there are other ways that we communicate that maybe we're not as aware of, that send messages that are inconsistent with what our words are meant to communicate. So there's so many ways that we communicate non-verbally as well, with our facial expressions and with the way that we move our bodies when we communicate. We use body language, and sometimes we use touch and physical proximity or closeness to communicate certain messages. Eye contact definitely has an added value in communication, and eye contact, I think, is important to consider when we think about interacting with folks who are from different cultures. Like, eye contact is navigated differently depending on what your cultural orientation or cultural background is. As I said before, vocal inflection, or the way that we use our voice, can communicate opposite messages using the same words. Like if I say to all of you in the room, like, I'm so happy to see you today, or if I say, I'm so happy to see you all today. Like that communicates very different messages. So we do want to be thinking about the ways that the nonverbal or the supplemental communication modes that we use really help to direct the way our verbal communication comes across and how we're understood. And then I also just wanted to bring some attention to how we have come to use text and symbols so much in the ways that we communicate. Sometimes we're communicating literally through text when we email or when we text message or when we chat, when we use emojis. So much of this, and I think this applies to the workplace and our personal relationships, we rely on text to communicate, and sometimes that can send messages that maybe we don't intend. So really thinking about all of the ways that we communicate is just meant to bring awareness to all of the ways and how those ways that we communicate supplement the meaning that we communicate to our partners and loved ones and colleagues. So we want to do a quick poll. What do you think is your most influential communication skill from all of these options? And obviously there are probably more, but from these that we just discussed or that I just described, what do you think is your most influential communication skill?
And Ronnie, while they're filling that out, do you mind sharing just your PowerPoint and not your screen? Because those little
sure.
boxes continue to pop up throughout.
I can do that. I'm going to stop share for a second and reshare. So how are we doing on our poll? I was able to see the results and now I'm not, but
That's okay.
it looked like,
Here you go.
okay. Well, it looks like we're kind of across the board, but it looks like the largest majority of you selected non-verbally, which is really interesting and accurate because, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but up to 65% of our communication happens non-verbally. So that's really interesting that you all, that was the biggest category that you all chose. Yeah. So good job. Nonverbal is a big way that we communicate. And of course, verbally, our words are expressing things directly to others. And the way that they understand them is so heavily influenced by nonverbal skills. So we're going to talk more about that today.
Ronnie, this is Susan. I have a question about the difference really between nonverbal and then the physicality thing, the body language, touch, and the eye contact. To me, those are nonverbal.
Those are nonverbal. You're right. And so nonverbal is sort of the umbrella under which some of these other specifically nonverbal skills happen. So if you chose nonverbally, you could mean things like eye contact, body language, vocal inflection. There's a lot of different specific skills that fall under that nonverbal umbrella. So that's a great question, and thanks for clarifying that.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We are going to continue on. Thank you for participating in that poll.
Right. Well, I love that you just pointed to the nonverbal. Thanks for noticing that. And so, yeah, as Ronnie just said, 60% of our communication is nonverbal. And so you kind of saw the umbrella that lands under. And I'm noticing since we had such a higher amount in that area, what do people just popcorn out notice with their nonverbal that since that was just kind of activated within yourself? What are ways that you think you're good at nonverbal? And you can just shout it out.
Body posture.
Body posture. Yeah. So the way you hold yourself.
And reading how other people are holding themselves.
Awesome, Lydia. Yeah. So like also reading the room when you walk in, if someone's sitting there with their arms folded, what does that tell you? Versus.
Mackenzie in the chat said head nods.
Oh, head nods. Thanks, Mackenzie. Yep. Head nods. Isn't that a fantastic way of letting someone know that you're listening? And showing, Kaylee, thank you, mirroring. So mirroring is another amazing way of when someone says something to you, you're mirroring it back to them. And we have parts in our brain that are neurotransmitters that help us connect when people are mirroring back what we're saying. It helps us feel heard. It helps us feel seen. It helps us feel understood. Anything else? Super helpful. And, you know, I just want to go back in the chat and just acknowledge what M. Farrell said. Oh, not M. Farrell, sorry, I'm going to go back a little further. I caught something in connection with neurotype. Oh, it was Kat. In regards to ADHD or folks autistic ability. So it says having less ability and comfort with communicating. And so just noticing, and that for some people, the verbal, like intense eye contact, or you know, it's just more comfortable for others to not have their head up and look at you, and that it can be like super overwhelming for others. So in just noticing with your own emotional intelligence and reading the room about where someone else might be with their own communication skills, and this includes children as well. You know, they're still learning, and we're all still learning. I noticed there's one more moment. Sorry, I'm jumping to it. Okay, Nikki says breathing. I think it's something that is more subtle, but that we probably pick up. Yeah, Nikki, say more about that? Like with breathing, is that like noticing yourself or noticing others?
Yeah, I was thinking, I know if I'm activated, you know, in a stressful type of way, the first thing I kind of recognize is how I'm breathing.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a way to calm myself down. It's like, okay, slow the breathing down. So I'm just kind of assuming that if somebody else is feeling kind of activated in their body, that, you know, even though I may not notice their breathing, it's probably something that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so awesome. Thanks so much, Nikki, for sharing with that. Yeah. And so even like when someone else is being like feeling nervous, you can kind of read that in the other. Like right before this presentation, I was feeling a little nervous, and I noticed I was holding my breath. And so I took some deep, intentional breaths to kind of help myself regulate. And that kind of taps into what the slide is nodding to here, is that, you know, breathing provides information to others, and also you can regulate yourself through your own nonverbal communication. So appreciate that, Nikki, you bringing that up. Also noticing facial expressions. Thanks, Kat. So true. Like I was an art teacher, and I used to teach kindergarten through 8th grade how to draw a face. And it's so interesting that in just showing kids that the eyebrows, they show a lot with, like, if you're mad, they're going downward like this. If you're surprised, they're up like that. And there's all these different ways that we communicate with our faces and showing where we're at and what we understand. Yeah, just eat a lemon and watch someone's face, like navigate that lemon. There's, you know, sometimes a lot of different things happening there. But finally, yeah, this helps us define our relationships and connect with others, and how we really are with others, and how we are being present, not only in our relationships, but also within our own systems. And we have the power to navigate how we feel with our own nonverbal communication. So we're going to go more into that down the line. Thanks, Ronnie. Any other thoughts from you, Ronnie?
Well, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep talking about it. So we will certainly have some more thoughts about it. And thank you for all your participation. It's great to hear your voices and see your chat pop up.
Yeah.
So just a little bit more about nonverbal communication. This image here describes the type of space that typically we're comfortable with. And this is very Western culture based. So, you know, in Western culture, intimate space, which is usually reserved for like intimate partners or core family members, is between 0 and 18 inches. Whereas personal space, like friends or extended family members, is between 18 inches and 4 feet. In a social context where you're with acquaintances or colleagues, so this would be common in the workplace, would be between 4 and 10 feet. And then public space, like people you might pass by or strangers, is usually 10 plus feet. So this really, like the space between people when they're communicating can give you information about their level of comfort and the nature of the relationship. And you can probably all relate to like people who are just close talkers. Like when somebody is standing too close and you feel that impulse to back up, like that gives you information about the nature of the relationship and your own level of comfort with that person. And so sometimes we can adjust our space when we're talking with other people to just influence communication without being that close talker, making people uncomfortable. But sometimes we do negotiate our communication with the use of touch and with personal space. And this is also very cultural. So context is really everything. And we have to be aware of when we're working with folks who are from different cultures, or we're in relationship with folks who are from non-Western or underrepresented groups, it may be that their comfort level and the space that they are comfortable with is different from ours. And so when we're interpreting what that might mean, we have to consider that what it means for us, that amount of space between people, might not mean the same thing for whoever it is that we're communicating with. So that is important to consider too, is both our own context and the context of whatever person we're engaging with. We communicate through facial expressions. Jen was mentioning the eyebrows. I think eyebrows are really telling. Sometimes you can tell whether someone's being genuine by whether or not their eyes crinkle when they smile. Like you can tell a genuine smile versus a forced smile. Head and hand movements. I think someone mentioned head nods as a way of communication. Absolutely. But someone else mentioned body posture. So you all are really familiar with the multiple ways, and so many of these ways that we communicate are in our subconscious. We're doing them as a way of habit, or a way of, they're just natural to us. Like even as I'm sitting here talking, I notice that I'm using my hands. You can't tell because you can't see my hands, but that's just something that is a habit for me. It's become pretty normal for me when I'm presenting or talking, especially when I'm really interested in what I'm talking about, to get really expressive and use my hands as a way of expressing enthusiasm. It's not intentional. It's not my conscious awareness. And as we start to become more aware of all of the ways that we communicate, we can start to use some of these skills more intentionally to help influence our communication and make sure that the messages that we're sending are received in the way that we intend. Anything else that you want to add to that, Jen?
Oh, it just brought up this year that I lived in Finland. I lived in Helsinki, and it was very different than, Montana, in the sense of the personal space that others needed. And, I learned real quick, oh, I am way too close to folks and wanting to connect, because I really wanted friends. And it was just culturally, it's good to note what is acceptable when you're traveling, or even in Montana. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And thanks so much for sharing that. It also reminded me that in certain contexts, it's appropriate for people who are not intimate partners or core family members to enter your intimate space. Like when you go to the dentist, for example, or when you're getting your hair cut, or if you're having like a medical procedure. Like in certain contexts, it's okay to enter that personal space. And in other contexts, it's very uncomfortable. And you can probably think of examples from your own life of when somebody came into your personal space and they were not welcome there. So just important to become aware of, and also think about how we can influence situations through personal space. There's research in how we influence people through touch. This was research that was done a long time ago, but in restaurants, when servers touch the shoulder or touch the elbow of their customers, they typically will receive bigger tips. So that's just an example of how like touch can create positivity that influences future behavior. And this is just a funny example of a nonverbal communication between partners.
Arms folded.
Yeah, not an effective communication strategy. I would not recommend you doing this. All right. So I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about paralanguage. So paralanguage is what's underneath the actual words that we speak. And so when we think about like voice intonation or vocal inflection, that's paralanguage. But paralanguage can function in a lot of different ways to complement our words. Like they can say basically the same thing that our words are saying. So if I'm saying, I'm really excited that you all are here today, and I say that with enthusiasm, you believe me. Like my inflection and the way that I'm saying that, I hope you believe me, is complementing my words. Sometimes our vocal inflection or the way that we use our voice can contradict our words. And I'm going to show you a really quick, funny example from Friends.
Totally. I'm fine. Totally fine. I don't know why it's coming out all loud and squeaky, because really, I'm fine. You know what we should do? Calm ourselves? No. We should all have dinner. Yes, we'll do it tomorrow night. I'll cook.
Look, don't you think that'll be a little weird?
Weird? What? What's weird? The only thing weird would be if someone didn't like Mexican food because I'm making fajitas.
All right, so you saw evidence there, I hope, of how sometimes vocal inflection, as well as things like space, personal space, and body movements can contradict our words. And I think that we're probably all familiar with a time when someone definitely was communicating something that was different than their words. I can certainly think of times when I have been communicating things that were different than my words in just those additional ways that we communicate. Sometimes they can accent or accentuate words, like make the words that we say stronger. Sometimes they can repeat the words, like it's similar to accentuating, but like when your action, the expression actions speak louder than words is an example of how we repeat our words through our actions. Sometimes they can substitute for words. Sometimes we can do things that will communicate without needing words. And our paralanguage helps to regulate communication. When you think about turn taking, or you might think of people who have a hard time interrupting or talking over other people, that regulates communication and could definitely communicate something beyond what the actual words are saying. Anything to add here, Jen, before we move on?
No, I just love that Friends. And I'm noticing Kat mentioned, I say I'm making fajitas so often. Yeah, just so funny, and how he was able to convey in so many different ways, rushing forward, inflection of tone, really high pitch, and then yeah, just all the facial expressions that don't match what he's actually obviously feeling inside. So yeah, great example. Thanks, Ronnie.
And you can also see like what the impact of his communication was. Like Rachel and Joey kind of like startled a little bit. It was alarming to them. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
All right. So we're going to move into touch. And Virginia Satir is someone that did, well, like, was she a professor? What was she, Ronnie?
She's a family therapist, and I think she was also a professor, but her passion was in counseling couples and families.
Yeah, and she did some research, right, into how important it is for physical touch. And she says we need 12 hugs a day to thrive. And so as humans, we are hardwired for touch and physical touch. They've been doing a lot of studies too in hospitals on how touch can help ease pain and stress, and just hand holding can help people regulate and moving through their day. Noticing here that also there's more studies that found that communicating, that touch, we do this more than we think we do. That we use touch in a lot of different ways in conveying how we feel. As a teacher, I noticed that sometimes if someone was having a really hard time, if I would just lay my hand on the back of them, and that kids would like just kind of relax a little bit. And so noticing that the power of touch with people that you have a relationship established already is really helpful. And we all have probably been in that moment of sadness when we got that hug and it just lasted a little longer, and it really helped shift and helped our internal system move into a better place. And that kind of is the quality versus quantity, and how a 6-second hug, you know, it's longer than you think. The next time you give someone a hug, just kind of count silently and see if you can get to 6 seconds. And it's really a powerful way of just helping your nervous system calm, and and it often helps other people feel calm as well. Touch is so powerful because it really lets others know that you care. It lets them know that you're accessible, and that you're here to comfort them and just give that extra bit of attention through a nonverbal form. And like I said earlier, and Ronnie was alluding to this, we really regulate our emotions with our own touch. And so if you are feeling nervous, if you're in the workplace and feeling elevated or aroused in the way like a hyper arousal, you know, you're having a reaction within that's, you're feeling angry or upset, you can put your hand on your chest and just kind of press in. And I'm wondering if everyone can just kind of do this for a moment and just take a moment to like maybe take a deep breath. And you can go another step by closing your eyes and really focus on filling your abdomen with the breath. And just by doing this for like 10 seconds, you're going to help your nervous system calm and regulate and just feel another level of peace within yourself. Yeah, you can also put it on your stomach, hand to hand. You can wrap your arms around yourself. And when I was a teacher, we used to do these little tricks with kids that help bring the brain come together. So kindergartners would come in from recess and they would be like pretty stoked and excited and running around, and you know, they're just at recess, so they're just running around. And so we would do these tricks where we'd have them touch their ears, touch their shoulders, touch their knees, and just touch. That is telling this brain to talk to this brain, and this brain to connect with this brain. And it's a bilateral stimulation, a physical tool in helping the brain connect. And then you can learn when both sides are talking to each other. So you can do these little tricks. Just Google bilateral brain stimulation teacher tricks, and you can see that you can do this to yourself in helping your brain learn more. Any other thoughts on this, Ronnie?
I just want to really drive home the 6-second hug. And in all, you will not apply this in all relationships, obviously. Like in some relationships, it would be really awkward and weird to hug for 6 seconds. So I just want to normalize that. But when you think about like your closest people, your closest friends, your intimate partners, your children, your parents, your siblings, like the relationships that feel the most close to you, a 6-second hug actually triggers the brain to release a chemical called oxytocin. And oxytocin is informally labeled the cuddle hormone. It's the chemical that's released when mothers breastfeed their babies, and it's meant to establish a connection between people, but it applies in so many different contexts. And the science behind it is that it takes 6 seconds for the brain to release that drug or that chemical. And oxytocin has the same effects on the brain as like a drug. It's really powerful how when the brain releases oxytocin, it can give you a sense of feeling connected and feeling even a little bit euphoric. Like it's just really, it's really powerful. And I don't think we really think about what's actually happening in the body and what that level of touch can really do for our well-being. So when you think about your partings in the morning or whenever you leave the home in the morning and you say goodbye to your loved ones, make an effort to incorporate a 6-second hug. And maybe when you come back together at the end of the day, or maybe it's before bed, or maybe you set aside some time to just connect with your person or people in your life, make an effort to incorporate some touch, because it really does make an impact on our well-being. And then long-term, it can really be a preventative factor for a lot of different health concerns.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to engage you in an activity for a few minutes, and I'm going to talk about this for a few minutes, and then we'll have you in 5-minute breakout rooms in groups of, Emily, I think I might have said groups of 4, and here I say pairs, trios. So I think it'll be okay if it's in groups of 4. But we want you to think of a time when you had something important to communicate with a coworker, a friend, or a family member. So something that's like, that's not spontaneous, but something that was important to you. Maybe it was something that, maybe it was a great idea that you had that you wanted to present at work. Or maybe it was like, I'm having an issue that I want to talk with my friend about. Or maybe it's, what are we going to do this weekend? Like something that felt important to you, that you had some time to think about, and that you planned to communicate to someone in your life, either at work or in your personal life. And I'm going to move away from this screen for a minute and just talk about, I'm going to refer to this Tough Talk preparation worksheet. There's 2 pieces of this sheet that we want to talk about. And the first is, as you think about this thing that you wanted to communicate with someone in your life, what needs were you aware of? There are always needs that are underneath our behavior. Our behavior is purposeful, even when it's not intentional. So a way of developing awareness around like how you proceed with communicating things that are important to you, it's helpful to think about what needs you're aware of, and then what feelings you're aware of. And your feelings can give you information about whether or not your needs are met. So I'm going to leave this screen and go to the Tough Talk preparation worksheet. And we'll first look at page 4. Actually, I'm going to cancel that. Give me 1 second and we're going to go, here we go. All right. So I'm going to go first to page 4. Is everybody with me? Can you see that screen?
Yeah, it looks good, Ronnie. I see it.
Okay, great. There we go. Okay, so I'm going, this page 4, make sure I'm on the right place. Here's our needs. And these are just an example of what potential needs might be underlying something that you want to communicate that's important. And this worksheet divides them into categories of like physical well-being, harmony, connection, meaning, et cetera, et cetera. So each of the categories have specific and more just more needs that are more differentiated than the umbrella need that important thing might fall under. So as you reflect on this thing that you wanted to communicate, try and identify what need was underneath that important thing that you wanted to communicate. Maybe it's a sense of connection, or maybe if it's in the workplace, it's like confidence or competence, or maybe it's compassion. You needed to tell someone something and you really needed them to understand and show you compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to give you a minute to look at this list and try and identify one or two or even three needs that were underneath this thing that you wanted to communicate to someone in your life. If you have a piece of paper, you can jot it down. If you want to just remember it, that's okay. You should have this worksheet. So if you want to refer to it, that is helpful. But just kind of keep those needs that you identify in mind. So as you're picking out and identifying those needs, I'm going to scroll up a little bit to these feelings. And I realize that you can't see all of this. I wonder if I can make it just a little bit smaller so we can see all of it. There we go. So on the left-hand side are feelings that you might experience when your needs are fulfilled. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see feelings that you might experience when your needs are not fulfilled. So this might be helpful too, as you think about whatever that important thing was and maybe what happened in the way that you communicated it or the interaction that you had, the feelings that you remember experiencing, or even that you might be experiencing right now as you remember this interaction, can give you information about whether or not your needs were met.
Mm-hmm.
Jen, I'm going to pass it to you. Is there more that you wanted to say about this before we?
You know, I'm just remembering when I first learned about the connection between needs and feelings, and that how they thread together. And noticing, like, walking into the room, say you're going to work and you're just feeling so exhausted, feeling so tired, and that's usually related to a physical feeling, to a need that you actually didn't get enough sleep last night, or maybe during the week you haven't gotten enough sleep. So noticing that, getting your needs filled throughout the day, throughout the week, they usually thread to a feeling, and that feeling is usually like housed somewhere in your body. So I just remember also, when my kids were babies, I was constantly trying to tune in because they couldn't talk. They couldn't say, I'm tired, help me, go to sleep. My son would just like throw his body around. And I finally learned, oh, when you throw your body around on the floor, you're tired. And so noticing how others around you in your family or in the workplace may be communicating also their needs is helpful in connecting to a feeling that you might be able to assign to that as well. Like specifically when I notice if I'm teaching and students come in and they're just like super exhausted and sleepy, I know they probably didn't get enough sleep last night, or it's possible that they're hungry and they didn't get breakfast. So we're assessing this all the time internally and unconsciously too. So noticing it consciously is another level of awareness that you can take throughout your day. And but tuning into yourself first is kind of like the money maker in learning your own internal feelings and needs. Mm-hmm.
Jen, I love that example of your son throwing himself on the floor. And I can totally relate to that. I have 2 little kids, and it's, their emotion, they're not very good at regulating emotion yet. And I think as adults, we become more skilled at regulating emotion, sometimes to the extent that we don't really identify what it is that we're feeling. And we are just kind of like putting on the face in order to get through the day and to do the tasks that we need to do. And sometimes tuning into the feelings can help us to identify, like, what is it that I'm needing? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I feeling left out? Am I feeling unimportant or underappreciated? Like, what are the needs underneath the feelings that I'm having? And how can that guide my communication in order to help me get my needs met?
So true. And I'm just thinking of another fun kind of exercise. If you ever want to try this in the evening, the next TV show that you watch, try to assign a need and an emotion to that character. and just like see, notice like, oh, she's feeling excited. Oh, he's feeling concerned. Oh, now they're both feeling love. Oh, now it's moving into, and just note, see if you can like just kind of pinpoint that, and that's going to build up your emotional intelligence, and also help build up the awareness that, gosh, there's more than feelings than just sad, mad, and glad. There's a lot of emotions that we hold within ourselves, and that's just kind of a fun exercise in learning.
Yeah. So what we want you to do now is thinking of this time that you had something important to communicate, and thinking about the needs that you might have identified in the Tough Talk preparation sheet, as well as what feelings you were aware of and whether that indicated that your needs were either met or unmet. We want to invite you to engage in some discussion with each other about how your feelings informed you about whether or not your needs were met. And then when we come back together, we'll just have a little bit of processing, and part of what we'll be talking about and guiding you through in the follow-up session is like, then what do you do? What do you do next once you've identified that your needs are not met or that your feelings are giving you information? We'll talk more about this. So the question that we want you to discuss for about 5 minutes is how your feelings informed you about whether or not your needs were met in that situation that you're recalling. Welcome back, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we could have probably spent a lot more time, and we're going to have another breakout room in a little bit where you'll get to share more. Any reflections that you feel like you'd like to share with the larger group?
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to just pop out.
Yeah, and it's always so great to hear from your own personal experience of what you notice within yourself, within the learning or hearing from others. What do people notice?
I can share just real quickly on that because I feel like I took too much time in our last session. Is this really helped me identify that's what my feelings have been going on for the last couple of weeks, is just the frustration about who I'm communicating with, and it's not going as I'd like. So thank you.
Yeah, so it sounds like in just being in that breakout room that you noticed within your own emotional landscape that you're just feeling super frustrated right now, and just threading, whatever the situation was to the need and the feeling of frustration. Thank you, Julie, for sharing them. Yeah. What else do people notice?
We were talking about how there can be multiple needs. There was a situation where I was advocating for myself, and so I had a need for understanding and autonomy. And even though the request or the ask to fulfill that need was not met, the need to advocate for myself was met. And so rather than just keeping that all internalized and ruminating on it, even though the need for freedom and autonomy wasn't met, it wasn't a way through my own advocation for my needs, if that makes sense. And so I think it's important that as we go into difficult conversations, understanding that we are making a request, it may not be fulfilled, but just the act of practicing advocating for our needs can help regulate our systems and our experiences.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing. We're gonna keep going, and we're gonna shift a little bit to talking about some specific strategies for communication.
Hey, Ronnie.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? I just wanted to acknowledge that very, very originally at the beginning, we had slated this as a 1-hour training, and then we made it longer. And so if any of you have to run off, and I see a few people that did, that's okay. This is being recorded, like I mentioned earlier, and we will distribute that and any other resources they have later. So you'll still get all the content, and we'll still be invited to the follow-up later. So just to make that makes sense.
Thanks, Emily. All right. So we're going to keep going here and we're going to shift a little bit to start talking about nonviolent communication. I'm going to pass it over to you, Jen. And I know that box popped up. It'll go away in just a sec.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Okay. Well, gosh, we could have talked so much more about what we were just discussing. I just want to thank Lydia for sharing that example, because I'm hoping to thread that back around as we get to some later slides. So thanks for just like laying the groundwork for that, Lydia. Okay, so moving into nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg, who's a researcher, and we're kind of tapping into his information. So if you want to Google him and learn more about his strategies and tools and tips and book, go for it. But let's move into moving into what we choose. So noticing that we always have the power to choose how we want to feel. And so with that is the power of noticing, is there a reaction happening, or can I just respond in this moment? What are the options? You always have the option. And just noticing, like an example of, as you're moving through traffic, and if someone cuts you off and gets in front of you, you have the choice. In that moment, you can blow your lid and get really upset and angry and swear and yell in your car and wish them ill, and just think about what that does within your system, within your internal system, and how you feel in that moment. You also have the choice to take a deep breath and be like, okay, well, there's that. And maybe that person is rushing to the hospital, or maybe they just literally didn't see you and they just made a mistake that was unintentional. Who knows? But noticing that you always have the choice to feel in that moment, either to blame the other or even move into shaming another, that this creates an internal reaction within your system. And so, yeah, we're just going to move into what the idea is of establishing relations based on honesty and empathy. And, you know, as we move through our life, noticing that your own honesty with yourself is connected to how you feel inside with the compassion and empathy. So what we have in common is just this universal need. We all want to feel safe. We all want meaning. We want our own choice in the matter, and with that is autonomy and also honesty. And so noting that, like, I want this within myself, but then others, they also want this. It helps us kind of create more compassion and empathy for everyone else around us when we're noticing, oh, you're just like me. You want to feel peace, you want to feel love, you want to feel cherished, you want to feel honored, you want to feel safe. And as you see, that next sentence says, I am responsible for my own needs. And Lydia just gave a great example of advocation. She was hoping to be heard and listened to and possibly get a need met. It's possible she won't get the need met, and she still was able to be responsible in advocating for something that she needed. And so in noting, like, wow, Lydia, that's just such a great example of you noticing a feeling, and also noting that that feeling, that need might not happen, but you taking responsibility for advocating for yourself. It was just a great step. So our needs, they motivate everything. And literally almost everything we do is in the pursuit of happiness. If you actually break it down, when you book a trip, when you go to the grocery store and buy food, like noting, oh, that's going to be such a good egg scramble. When you buy a car, when you move through your day, when you go to work, you're going to make money, and that's going to lead to, like, hopefully more happiness. Our needs motivate everything. And so, yeah, noticing the difference with that your needs really motivate and how you feel and work through your day is really helpful. Ronnie, what else do you have to add with this?
I think just that the purpose of this idea of nonviolent communication is to help us see other options besides our default. Because I think sometimes when we're faced with really difficult situations, we feel like our only choices are to blame other people or to blame ourselves, which can result in that shame. And so nonviolent communication is meant to open up more options for us where we are able to give ourselves some grace and permission to express our needs to others, being open to other solutions that may not be exactly the thing that we want to happen, but could still meet our needs. And then just create more connection through having empathy for others and being willing to compromise. So I think sometimes we get stuck in this like, oh gosh, it's all your fault, or, oh, it's my fault and I'm a bad person, versus like, we have other options than that. We can give ourselves and others grace and work towards compromise. So that's really like if we were to conceptualize nonviolent communication in just a couple sentences, I think that's the piece that I really want to bring attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so blaming others or blaming of yourself and activating that shame. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah.
So in that, these are really 4 components of nonviolent communication. So as Ronnie just noted, expressing ourselves in any form comes under this feeling of, wow, clarity, compassion, responsibility, self-responsibility, empathy, and the common good in mind. And so, yeah, with that, there's these 4 components. It's really helpful. So noticing for yourself, oh, what just happened? What just happened in this moment? I just let's give an example of someone sending an email and not getting a response right away. What is happening within your system? What do you observe within yourself? Noticing that, oh, you may feel not heard, you may not feel seen, you may feel ignored. Noticing that feeling is probably in your system. And what is the feeling within that? So with the feeling, how can you communicate the feeling to the other? And we're going to go into this more with like I statements and stuff like that, but noticing, okay, I have this feeling within myself right now of not feeling seen or heard or understood. I'd like to, communicate this to someone, the other person, and noticing that this falls under a need. So what is the need? Feeling seen, possibly feeling understood, noting that maybe you have a viewpoint that you really want to share with someone else on your staff, and how it may like grow your whole group together, and noticing, oh, I just really need to be heard in this moment, and holding off and stating it. Let's see, hold off and stating this for the next step. Okay, yeah. So Lydia noted, thanks so much, Lydia, for sharing, because I keep going back to that, and that sometimes that need won't get filled. And so holding back in that state and noticing, I did just advocate for this thing, and that is something that that happened in this moment. I might not get my need met, but moving into request, how can you request to get that filled? And so we're going to go into this more, but I'm just going to give a little teaser that sometimes it's nice to have more than one request in your back pocket, and maybe none of those requests will be filled. But what can you ask for from the other to get those in order to meet your need? All right. So Ronnie, what else do you think about this?
Oh gosh, Jen, I just thought of an example of something that happened to me in the last week that was so applicable to this example. And sometimes when you're working to communicate in this way, you don't get it right the first time. And I didn't get it right the first time. I have a friend and colleague who is really behind in her emails, and it's quite frustrating to me because sometimes I'll send emails out and I will get no response, and I really need her input. Like, her input is really important into my ability to move forward with doing tasks. So we had this conversation last week, and I needed to consult with her about something, and she had not read this email that I sent. And I said to her, like, you really need to read your email. And I said it just like that. And we continued the conversation. And then hours later, I was like, oh man, that was not very caring and thoughtful. And this is also somebody that I really care about, who's a friend of mine. So I started thinking, like, how can I repair? And this is kind of getting further into our presentation about how do you repair relationships when you mess up. And so my process of moving through these observation, feeling, need, request was reflective. Like, I realized that what was happening in that moment was I was really frustrated because I wasn't getting the information I needed to be able to move forward. And that had way more to do with me than it did her. And so I was feeling stressed and overwhelmed and frustrated. And the need was like, I need to accomplish something. I need to follow through with these tasks that need to be done. And so what I ended up doing was apologizing and letting her know that what I said had way more to do with me than with her, and that I was feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. And my request was like, hey, I really need you to know that our friendship is important to me, and I never want to damage that. And if I need something from you, I'm just going to call you and ask for it. And it was okay. So sometimes, and actually the email got responded to shortly after that, which was great. So sometimes, the initial need ends up being met too, but sometimes the process of moving through these steps comes when you don't do it right the first time and reflect, and then return to the conversation and choose to engage in a different way. So I just wanted to share that we don't always get it right the first time, and that's okay.
Yeah. Gosh, what a great example, Ronnie. And I just really appreciate you, your vulnerability and sharing that with everyone here. I can imagine that a lot of people are nodding their head and being like, oh, I've been there. That's something that's really relatable.
Yeah, it happens. And I think it happens even for those of us who feel like they have some skills, some communication skills.
Yep, all human.
I think it's also an interesting example to highlight how people have different communication pathways that they respond to in different ways. And so sometimes you have email people, sometimes you have phone call people, sometimes you have face-to-face people. And I think understanding the person that you're communicating with and what their preferred way of processing difficult information could be. Some people might prefer to read something in an email and sit on it. Other people might prefer to have those nonverbals of a face-to-face, or even just a phone call to hear inflection to be able to move through those things. And so that just adds that other dimension to what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Lydia. That really taps into like remaining curious about the other instead of moving into judgment. Yeah. So thanks, Lydia. Okay,
Yeah,
Ronnie. I interrupted you. Go
No,
ahead.
no, that's okay. We're going to invite you to join that breakout room again and discuss, if you were to enter that conversation again, that conversation that was really important, and maybe specifically thinking about a conversation where your needs weren't met, how might you enter it differently based on these 4 components: observing what happened, identifying a feeling, identifying a need, which we don't often communicate that need. It's sort of like something that we become aware of that helps us to understand more of why we're feeling how we are. So this step 3, or the unspoken need, is not often something that we communicate interpersonally, but it happens more intrapersonally. And then making a request. So here's an example. I noticed, which is an observation, when I came into the meeting, everyone was quiet. Okay, so I'm stating something that I observed that's factual. Now I'm going to identify the feeling. So I felt worried that something was happening I wasn't included on. So my unspoken need in this situation might be my need for belonging and inclusion. And we all have that universal need. So that need was threatened, which left me feeling worried. Okay, so I don't need to speak that, but I need to become aware of that. And then my specific request might be, can we talk about what happened so that I can understand where everyone is on this issue? So a request for inclusion or a request for more open communication. So we're going to invite you in this breakout discussion to apply these 4 steps: the observation, the feeling, your reflection on what the need was that you had in that situation, and then a specific request as applied to that situation where you were wanting to communicate something important to someone in your life, and maybe your need wasn't met, or there was just an interaction that didn't feel like it was meeting your needs in that situation. So we're going to give you about 7 minutes to engage in practicing this, this process of moving through observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And then we'll come back and hear from you about how it went. Yeah, thank you all. One of the observations that I made is just that so much of this can apply to the workplace and to our personal lives. And sometimes when we're thinking about our personal, closer relationships, expressing the need might be helpful, even though I know we were saying like, hold off on expressing the need. In relationships where there's more safety and vulnerability, it can be really powerful to express what need it is that you can identify, because it can help to soften whoever you're in relationship with to like, oh, I get this now. This isn't about picking my clothes up off the floor or being on time or doing my dishes. This is about like my partner's need for orderliness, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely, Ronnie. That feeds into what we were discussing, and how the need ties back to the work we were doing with emotional intelligence and values. Like a value will inform someone's need. If you have a value for truth, then you're going to have a need for honesty. And so being able to identify our own values and needs can help us advocate for ourselves, but it can also help us build empathy for others, right? If I just don't understand where they're coming from, like trying to identify what is the value that's driving their behavior and what might be the need that's not being met, and put that into that context of our humanity. Like, okay, I want to help fulfill this person's needs.
Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Lydia, for tapping into values, how powerful it is to know what our own internal values are. And then it's so helpful when we know our people around us, their values as well. So if someone's having an external reaction that may be steeped in maybe hard work is their value, and you're noticing that they're really upset because you're coming into work a little 5 minutes late, and they're having a really powerful response. For me, it might be helpful to know, oh, they're having a really big response right now. I wonder what their value is within that, behind that response, and also the need. And it might be, oh, I wonder if they like hard work is a really strong value for this person. That makes sense that they would have a really powerful response, and I can adjust and try to see if I can meet that need for them, and adjust a little bit in that way, or even just know more understanding for the other person, that's like a really powerful value for them.
Yeah.
Lydia?
Yeah. So we have about a half hour left, so I'm going to keep us moving along, and I'm hoping that we will have enough time for some questions at the end. And just know that as we start to move quickly through some of this content, that we are going to be coming back in a couple weeks to dive into this a little bit more. So just stick with us and know that there's more coming if you want to join us in a couple weeks. All right.
We really hope you come.
Yes, we do.
Mhm.
All right. So we're going to shift and talk more about the power of listening, and how listening to understand versus listening to respond can be such a powerful tool that can help us with communication. And I have this image here, the 7 steps to active listening. We're not going to talk specifically about these, but some of these are going to come up in our follow-up session. So oftentimes when we're having a conversation, especially one that feels important, we can get so wrapped up in how we're going to respond when we're listening to someone, as opposed to just really centering ourselves in understanding what it is that our partners or our coworkers or our friends or family members are trying to convey. And I think we get so attached to our own personal outcome that sometimes we feel as though if we're listening to understand that somehow we have to let go of what our own goals are in communicating or in the conversation that we're engaging in. And so I just want to normalize that and create the flexibility around how we can do both, how we can both listen to understand what our partners, family members, friends, coworkers are saying to us and maintain our own position on a particular issue. And when we listen to understand, it's a short-term goal that's often meant to resolve a situation or come to a compromise or an agreement about a specific event. But when we continue to do that in our relationships, it builds relationships, which is our long-term goal. So I'm going to show you a brief video from Brene Brown about empathy. And then Jen and I are going to do a really brief demo that can help you see an example of what the difference is between listening to understand and listening to respond.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Oh my gosh, that video, I bet I've seen it like 50 times. Every time I get something, it just goes deeper within my system about how powerful empathy is and noticing the difference with sympathy.
I just love it so much. I've watched it a bunch too. And, you know, I think that this can apply to, like in these examples, when someone's expressing something that they just need to be heard. And when we have a vested interest in what the person is saying to us, that's, I think, when we can be tempted to get preoccupied by our response versus our understanding. Mm-hmm. So just keep that in mind. And Jen and I are going to do just a quick demo, and I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so that you can Oops. So you can see us. We do this. We're going to first demonstrate listening to respond. So this is what we're saying is not what we want to encourage. And it's, it's just helpful to sometimes see some examples of like, what does this look like in practice? So we're going to keep it real brief, but we're going to just kind of show you what it might look like.
Yeah. So Ronnie and I are girlfriends and we're at the coffee shop. Oh my gosh, Ronnie, I am so stressed out right now with my teenage daughter.
What's going on?
Oh, she is just, she's out of control. Like she's not going to class. And then there's this boy and then her friends. And I'm like so overwhelmed and so stressed out. I don't know what to do.
What are you going to do? I mean, she's missing school.
Oh gosh, she's like, I don't even know what she's doing when she's not in school. I just like, I feel so stressed and I'm so worried. And I just really, I don't know what to do with her.
Oh my gosh. And she's getting ready to go to college next year, right? Like this isn't good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh yeah. And then there's that. Yeah. And so she's not even going to be ready. Like I am so at my wits' ends with her and what I can do to her. She's not listening to me at all. I'm so stressed out about this.
Oh, Jen, you got to just lay down the law with this girl. I mean, she's got to get it together.
Yeah, she should do this and she should be going to school and she should be like, working hard towards her education and she should be around other friends that are like mimicking good values.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, that was quick.
Yeah.
What did you notice? I'm going to ask Jen, like Jen, what was your response or what was your reaction to the way that I was responding to you?
I felt like I was getting more and more elevated about
me too.
This pretend daughter that I have.
Get a handle on that girl.
Yeah. And I felt a lot of pressure that I was the person to solve it.
Yeah.
And it just kept kind of pointing towards the unsolvable within me, which left me feeling like just hopeless.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed in myself was that I was feeling your stress and responding to it as if it were mine. Like instead of connecting with you, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to figure this out. This girl's got, that I was feeling that stress from you and responding to it as if it were my own, as opposed to being able to join with you.
Yeah, when you were saying you should to me, what she should do and what I should do, that was just like, oh my gosh, so much pressure.
Yeah.
And also made me feel like I'm a terrible parent. I haven't been doing this in the first place.
Yeah. Let's try it again. Should we?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Emily says, don't shit on yourself or other people. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Ronnie, I am so stressed out right now. My daughter is like not going to school and she's hanging out with this boy and I don't know, her friends are just all partying and I don't know what to do right now.
You sound really worried.
I am. I'm just feeling like I don't know. I feel like I'm a bad parent right now and I want to do the right thing and I just don't know what to do.
Yeah. You just feel really helpless. Like
yeah,
all this stuff is going on and you're just not sure how you can help.
Yeah. Yeah, that is how I feel. And I'm just noticing that I just want to cry in the evenings when I think about her because I feel like I have zero control over any of it.
Yeah. This is so important to you that she's okay.
Yeah, yeah. She's so important to me. I love her so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for telling me, Jen. This sounds super hard. And it's so clear to me how important it is to you to be a good mom and guide her.
Thanks, Ronnie. It just feels so good to just be seen and heard right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So again, really brief. And What do you notice about that interaction, Jen? How did that feel different than the first one?
You were pointing to the emotions I was feeling and validating them. And it just felt I just felt like in a cocoon of being understood.
Yeah.
Mm.
For me, it felt like, oh gosh, I could notice the feelings that came up in me as you were describing what you were experiencing. And I could notice those and then center myself with you.
Yeah.
Instead of reacting to my own emotions and how I would feel in that situation, which I think is one of the, when we describe empathy, it's like keeping one foot fully grounded in your own experience and having one foot kind of straddling the other person's experience, right? Like you can be with them and feel what they're feeling and not get lost in it because you can still stay grounded in yourself and join with them and be a solid person that's not going to amplify what it is that they're describing.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for doing that with me, Jen.
And I'm just noticing another couple things that was really nice is you didn't try to solve it or like share like you should or you need to or she needs to. It was just,
or this is what I did.
Yeah, or sharing like your own experience, which is what most of us do, and then try to solve it. It just, I just felt like, I can just relax in this moment right now. What this is stressful, and I'm not alone.
Yeah,
I know that there's something even like when I'm not sure what the other person wants from the interaction, as simple to ask of, do you need a vent or do you want advice? Like,
what do you
just
need?
Put it out there. What do you need from me?
Yes.
Because sometimes it is hard to be like, and we're fixers. A lot of people are fixers and they want to offer advice and that might not be helpful. So sometimes it's worth just asking.
Totally. Love that. Okay. We're going to keep moving, folks. And we're going to start talking about some communication challenges.
Okay. Ooh, I love talking about these words. Okay. How many people here have a friend that may say to you every once in a while, I just love you, but anyhow, whatever it is that's coming up, or has even witnessed someone else with that. So we're going to kind of talk about the power of words and how noticing how they come up in our vocabulary and how they either build connection with the other or can sometimes drive us apart. So a powerful word is but. Usually anything you say before but is negated. So saying, I just love you, but Ronnie, I think you can do better on that last demo. Sorry, that felt harsh, but we're just playing here. So noticing that you can really replace the word and with but in most instances. And it's really powerful because it helps the other person not bring up defenses within themselves. It helps them to hear the next part of something that you may be sharing. So, Ronnie, I just love you. And I'm wondering how we can work on that demo a little differently. What do you think?
I'm in.
Okay. So, Ronnie, how did that feel, that interaction versus
it felt like you actually do love me.
Yeah. So just noticing, and I just want to normalize it. We all say but. It's in our culture, it's in the media we watch, it's in us. So giving yourself a little break with that, with the word but and all these words I'm going to bring up. It's there and I use it too. So that is one. If you can just add in the and take out the but, it's pretty powerful in communication. The next two are always and never. So in relationships, we often use always or never in a way that's very black and white. You always leave the dishes undone, Ronnie, when you come over to eat.
No, I don't. That makes me feel defensive.
So always and never, it's very definitive. It's like chopping, just this kind of connection that doesn't happen because it's black or white. And is that true, Ronnie? Do you never do the dishes? No,
that's
like
not true.
we're complex people, and sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes someone doesn't put the seat down on the toilet, or doesn't pick up their clothes, or doesn't pick up the dog poop. But finding a way to kind of soften and use a different word instead of always and never is really helpful. And we're going to go more into that. But one really just helpful tip is using a nice statement. I'm wondering if you can help me a little more with the dishes, Ronnie, when you come over. How did that feel?
Much better.
Better. Okay. I'm
It's a
going a little
request.
fast right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So why? Wow. When I learned about why, it blew my mind. So imagine you're with someone and they say to you, why would you do that? Just my voice, my inflection, the way my face felt, it feels kind of judgmental, doesn't it? And usually when people get a why question, it can bring up the defensiveness within themselves, and they need some protection. It's a little scary. So noticing how you use the word why is another helpful word to notice. Open-ended versus closed-ended. All right, so anyone here that's a teacher, we know the power of open-ended question versus closed. Closed is usually, it's a question that gives a yes-no response. And an open-ended question, it invites collaboration, it invites others to join, it invites more curiosity from the group. And so noticing if you use open-ended question versus closed. And Ronnie, do you have any off the top of your head, like a good closed-ended question?
Well, did you tell your daughter that she needs to go to school?
So good. Yeah.
Yeah, a closed-ended question can be answered with yes or no. And so that's a really good check for yourself when you're trying to understand the difference between the two. Is the question you're asking something that can be answered with a yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then it's closed-ended. And if the answer is no, then it's open-ended questions. So open-ended questions usually begin with like how or what.
Yeah. How can we all work together in this training to improve our communication?
Yeah.
That just like opens the doorways for anyone to share and move into collaboration and communication.
Yeah.
All right. So noticing the time, I'm going to kind of just read these out to you. Observation versus evaluation. Oh, this is our poll.
Yeah. So we're going to have you look at each of these items and ask you whether or not these are observation statements or evaluation statements. So an observation is something that's factual, whereas an evaluation is something that has some judgment attached to it. So the first one, Sally was angry at me yesterday for no reason. What do you think?
All right. Right now we've got 7 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. We're at, everyone says evaluation.
Okay, that's great. That was an evaluation because Sally didn't really know the reason. She felt like, or the person stating it felt like Sally was angry, but really didn't know the reason. And maybe there was a reason. All right, let's try the second one. Joe told me I don't look good in orange. An observation or an evaluation?
All right, we've got 5 people saying observation, 1 saying eval. We still got some coming in.
Okay.
Got 8 out of 10. Any last minute votes? All right, we've got 7 who say observation and still 1 that says evaluation.
Yeah, observation is correct. It's factual. Joe actually told me I don't look good in orange. If it were Joe told me I look ugly, that might have been more evaluative, and if Joe didn't actually say that. So it's specific and factual. Let's try this next one. Janine works too much.
So far we've got 8 say evaluation and 1 says observation.
Yes, observation or evaluation is correct. we can't describe or maybe differentiate what is too much. Maybe Janine doesn't feel like she works too much, or maybe somebody else who is observing Janine wouldn't feel the same way. So too much is an evaluative statement. Yeah, good job. Last one. Robert didn't ask for my opinion yesterday at the meeting. Observation or evaluation?
We've got 8 saying observation, 9 saying observation.
Yes, good job. So this isn't an observation that Robert didn't actually ask for my opinion yesterday at the meeting. So the takeaway here is that when we are when we're communicating using observation and as factual, specific information that is contributing to, how we solve problems together, how we compromise, is really helpful. Evaluative statements sometimes make the situation a little bit more challenging.
Thanks
Good
everyone
job.
for participating in that.
Yeah, good job.
Ah.
Okay, so the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, and there is a video here, but I'm going to hold off on it just because I want to make sure we have a few minutes for questions, and we have just a couple more slides that we're going to review. We'll spend more time with the 4 horsemen in the follow-up session and as well in conflict management. But these are really destructive patterns of communication that John Gottman, who's a relationship researcher, has identified as really determining whether or not a relationship will succeed or fail. So contempt is like direct evaluation of a person's character. So if I said something like, "You're such a slob," that would be an example of contempt, that it comes out in my voice, it comes out in my intonation, as well as the words that I'm saying. And contempt is the most damaging to a relationship. The antidote to contempt is creating a culture of appreciation, like us expressing something that I appreciate about the person that I'm working with and making a specific request, or using an I statement. So again, using the word and instead of but. Criticism is a more general, like a generalized complaint about someone, using some oftentimes always or never, like you always leave dishes in the sink. Whereas the antidote to that could be very specific and express a complaint followed by a need. Like, I feel really frustrated when you leave dishes in the sink. Will you please put your dishes in the dishwasher? Okay. Defensiveness is when I feel attacked by something that someone says, like in response to that last example, "You always leave your dishes in the sink." My response could be, "No, I don't. I never do that." Whereas the antidote is accepting responsibility. Like, okay, I admit that sometimes I leave dishes in the sink. I'm going to accept responsibility for my part in this and work towards compromise. Stonewalling is when we just get completely overwhelmed and we feel like we can't engage in conversation. And sometimes it can involve like just completely shutting down. And sometimes it involves actually leaving the conversation, walking out. One way that we can avoid stonewalling is through self-soothing, like taking deep breaths, acknowledging the feeling that we're experiencing, maybe asking to take a break from the conversation and being willing to come back. So noticing these communication patterns and working to incorporate the antidotes can be really helpful in moving conversations forward in a productive way. And again, we're going to follow up on this a little bit more in the second session. So I'm going to move forward so we can get to some questions. That's okay.
All right. So repairing and ruptures within communication. We know that usually being in proximity to the other is more helpful in repair. Just sending a text or sending an email, sometimes, we can't read between the, what is being said, that lost in translation feeling. And so any way that you can connect with the other and be face to face, so they can genuinely see your face, your body language, that they're reading your tone, that it's so much more helpful to be in proximity with the other if you can do it. And so working through apology, like Ronnie was just saying with the Gottman, accepting what's wrong, and that's self-responsibility right there. Acknowledging, okay, yeah, this is, I messed up in this way, and I'm noticing that this is something I really want to work on and take responsibility. Showing that you generally understand what is being, what happened. It shows your genuine remorse. And then letting the other know, you know what, I'm going to really work on this. I'm going to try harder, and this is something that I have a goal to improve upon. And yeah, I just appreciate the grace that you might be willing to give in this way. This is just really this connection with apology. Apology is so powerful. It helps soften the other, and then it also helps bridge gaps and improve in our communication and understanding. Ronnie, do you have anything else I kind of blew through that because of time, but do you have anything to add?
I just want to add a quick example of how this might look. So these are the components of a good apology. Aaron Lazar wrote a book called On Apology, and the whole book is about these 4 steps. So if I were to offer Jen an apology for that really bad listening and responding demonstration that I gave, I might say something like, Jen, I realized that when you were talking to me about your daughter, I wasn't listening to you, and I was just making the situation worse. I realized that was my issue, and I was feeling stressed in the moment, and I wasn't available to you, and I'm really sorry. I really want to be a better friend, and I want to be able to listen to you and hear your concerns. And so next time when you have something to share with me, I'm going to do better about listening to you.
Wow.
So it's not a long thing, right? Like you can just a few sentences. Yeah. Making a good apology is really powerful.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yeah. I'm going to check in with you, Jen, and I think that this should be our last slide, and then we should open it up to questions. Is that okay with you?
Beautiful. All right. So in preparing, like I said earlier at the very beginning of the thing, that when we practice, it makes sense that we are going to do better when we're in a difficult conversation. But knowing ahead of time ways to self-soothe yourself before you go into a conversation that may be a little scary, finding ways to either, press your hand on your heart or breathe before you go in, finding ways to soothe yourself is going to help you as you move into that conversation. And like Lydia demonstrated earlier, advocating for yourself and using the components of nonviolent communication is just noticing what you observe, feeling the feeling, noticing what is actually the need that I have in this moment, and then making a request. And so this also plays into what we talked about just a few slides back with the managing pushback, but versus and noticing how that language may inform that difficult conversation, working towards connecting and actually having that idea within yourself of like, gosh, I really want to connect here. I really want to find compromise. I really want to work towards connection within this relationship. Just holding that intention is going to help within the conversation if it's a difficult one. And we're going to get back into the tough talk. Do you think that the next, Ronnie, or do we have time?
I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. And so
yeah, I agree.
Check out that tough talk preparation worksheet and bring that back with you next time. And we'll definitely dig more into that.
Yeah, there's really so much to cover, and we really hope you come to the next one because we're gonna put these into application.
Yes.
So yeah, what do people notice? What's a takeaway? What's something during this time together that's maybe a little nugget you can put in your back pocket? We love to hear from you.
I suppose I have a question. I guess I have practiced a lot of this in the past in previous relationships, and I would always get stuck when I was working on growing and communicating nonviolently and being receptive and open to compromise, and the person I was communicating with wasn't. And so our communication never went anywhere. Like I felt like I could do everything in my power, follow all the steps, and it never, came to fruition in any way. So I suppose if that, I'm curious if that is, we really only have control over the way that we handle situations. So at least we can look back on it and know that we handled it like with grace. But I don't know. I guess what do you do in those difficult situations where the other person isn't willing to compromise, be open to solutions, actively listen, that sort of thing?
That's so hard, isn't it? And I mean, you said it, you are only responsible for your own behavior and the way that you come into a conversation. And I think depending on the nature of the relationship, if that's the kind of relationship where you could offer someone feedback in a way that they might not get defensive, that's one additional strategy that you could use, like using an I statement. Like, I noticed that when we talk about these things, it seems like you have a hard time joining with me, or it seems like you get overwhelmed and that we can't stay engaged, or it seems like you feel really defensive when I talk to you about this issue. Like if there's a way that relationship is safe enough that the person could hear you, I think that's one way that you can just acknowledge what's happening in a way that would be less likely to make the person defensive. But that's not always effective either. It just depends on how open that person is to hearing that feedback from you and how you're able to deliver it in a way that helps them to not be defensive. But such a good question and so normal. I mean, I think we all experience that. We're only one half of the conversation, right?
Yeah, and I'm noticing Julie Williams says ditto to this. This is very relatable. And Ronnie, I was just really enjoying the way you were modeling using the word "it seems," sort of like externalizing the issue instead of pointing the finger and say, you always, you never listen to me. This always happens. Ronnie, you were just modeling that so nicely about, it seems like this is something that is difficult, and I'm wondering how we can work together on this. It just is really helpful in that language twist right there.
Yeah. Or like I noticed, I noticed that when we have these hard conversations, you're seeming defensive, and I wonder if there's a way that I can help you out so that we can have this conversation and you're not feeling so attacked.
The way that I see these communication strategies a lot of the time is harm reduction. There's always going to be risk anytime we're communicating and being vulnerable, especially when it's around an emotional issue. And so if we implement these practices, we're just reducing that risk that the conversation could go in a more negative direction. And we can't control the whole situation, but we can do our part. And then just like Jordy said, like resting in that assurance that we did what we could within our capacity to help it make a resolution.
I'm noticing that we're at time, and thank you so much, everybody. I think that we could probably talk about this for hours longer, and so we hope that you'll join us in a couple of weeks when we have our follow-up session.